Welcome back to the 6th issue of the newest Mutants. I am, of course, Laz, but enough about me until later. Today, we're talking about a super cool comic book, a very important comic book, and one that will have ramifications for days to come. And that is, of course, the Hellfire Gala issue and the first issue of the Fall of X Marvel X-Men event in the comic book series. So let's take a look at the cover, and this is the variant cover that I have. Check it out. I'll also put up, a better high definition one, but this is the cover I have. I'm just trying to get it out of the glare there. It is a variant cover, but let's take a look at a few other covers. Nice. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the comic, let us look at the facts of the issue. And this is Fall of X, number 1, Hellfire Gala. It's written by Jerry Duggan, and we have a whole slew of artists, and I'm assuming that some of these are for covers, but they didn't differentiate here in what I'm reading. But check it out. We have Adam Kubert, Luciana Vecchio, Matteo Lully, Russell Dodderman, Javier Pina, R.B. Silva, Joshua Cassara, and Chris Anka and Pepe Larocque as artists, all credited for this issue. As well, our color artists are Rain Barreto, Cici De La Cruz, Matthew Wilson, Eric Arcaniega, and Mara Gracia. These are our color artists. Doing the lettering, we have Virtual Calligraphine, and on design, Tom Muller with Jay Bowen. And C.B. Cebulski is our Marvel Editor-in-Chief. Our story starts off with Emma Frost, the White Queen, and Scott Summers, Cyclops, talking about Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, and that they should reveal the truth to her family. What exactly is that truth? Well, besides being an Inhuman, Kamala Khan is a mutant. Now, Kamala Khan had died protecting Mary Jane from a character named Rabin, and she had been resurrected on Krakoa. Professor X himself is like, hey, you can live on Krakoa with us mutants. They explain to her that her powers never manifested, and that's, of course, possibly because of the Terrigen mist that she was exposed to as an Inhuman, of course. But they don't know what her powers are. They've never seen anything like it. Luckily, Kamala was brought back to life just in time for the Hellfire Gala, and the White Queen has good old Jumbo Magneto was right Carnelian there to get her into something fit for a red carpet. So we are finally at the Hellfire Gala, and we are first greeted by the hosts, who are the Five. And they're talking about the theme of the gala, which is friendship and futurism, a dialogue. Beautiful. Additionally, a new team of X-Men will be voted upon. That is kind of cool, right? But wait, who are the Five? That is a good question, because I would like to know. Created by Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz, the Five debuted in House of X number 5 in 2019. According to the Marvel Wiki, Professor X created the Five after the founding of Krakoa, and the group includes Tempest, Proteus, Hope Summers, Elixir, and Egg. The idea of the Five actually came to fruition long before any of these characters were created or born, and was also conceived of by Moira MacTaggart, along with Charles Xavier, as a means of bringing the dead back to life. Oh, you crazy mutants! Like any good red carpet gala, guests are arriving, and boy, are they decked out. We have Scott Summers and Jean Grey showing up looking snazzy, as does the White Queen, who always looks pristine. Forge is looking good. Hell, even the Juggernaut is looking slick. We also get to see our girl Kitty Pryde, Kate Pryde. And Iceman shows up with Romeo. Also, please, let's look at Mystique. Oh, this is so good. We get another scene between Professor X and Kamala Khan. He was hoping one reason that she might announce to the world that she was part mutant was that mutants would love to have her, at least among their numbers. But also it might do some good to ease the fears people already have about mutant kind. A little bit of a goodwill type of gesture, I suppose. Classic Charles, always thinking about the big picture. Kamala is just worried that her parents are freaking out about her being dead. Now, during this conversation, this is where Charles tells her that they may not know what her power is and that it's probably because the terrorgenic gases from the Inhumans have had weird reactions with other mutants. Charles points out that Rogue is actually, kind of like allergic to this mist and has been nearly killed by it. Now, I have to point out this panel as it shows Rogue chatting with Captain Marvel. If you know anything about Rogue's origin, kind of funny. On the red carpet, Kamala meets someone called Rasputin 4, and by the looks of it, they're from the future and likely related to Colossus, but let's find out. This version of Rasputin actually first appeared in Immoral X-Men #2, released in March of 2023, and she is a hybrid of Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Laura Kinney, Gunter Bane, and Quentin Quire. Well, Rasputin 4 basically tells Kamala she's a hero of hers, and Kamala loves that. Next, we get a scene with Dimitri and Wynn, along with Magic. Now, Dimitri and Wynn are talking to Magic about a story where she announced that mankind had new gods, which are the mutants. She says it's true. Dimitri and Wynn are like, that's interesting. Magic's like, you guys don't have an invite, get lost. And so they do. I don't know much about Dimitri or Wynn, but they are going to be involved in Marvel's GODS comic. And maybe we'll talk about that if it involves the Fall of X. So while all of this happening, there are a lot of members of the Avengers at the gala. But something happens, and the Avenger members are like called away, and they all leave. While this is happening, Rogue has like this little like credit card shaped thing that's like, hey, Steve Rogers is in trouble and unresponsive, please help. Rogue is sort of like, okay, I'll go and help him. We get a little panel with Emma Frost, the White Queen. She's very concerned that one of the Hellfire Club founders, Sebastian Shaw, is not there. You may know him as the Black King, of course. And now for the moment that we have all been waiting for, and that's actually the announcement of the new X-Men team. What they do is that I think they use like Cerebro or telepathic voting to vote in the new team. I don't know who the candidates were, but we have a new team, and it's a good team. Okay, first, considered the bedrock of this new team is Synch and Talon, or maybe it's Cinch and Talon. These are two characters I'm not super familiar with, so let's learn about them. So Synch, according to the wiki, his first appearance was in X-Men Volume 2, number 36, September of 1994, created by Scott Lobdell, Fabian Nikizia, and Chris Bacalo. According to the wiki again, he was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and possesses an aura which allows him to sync up with other mutants and briefly gain their powers. And of course, I don't know how I didn't know this, but Talon is X-23. That's Laura Kinney. And Laura Kinney's first appearance was in NYX number 3, originally created by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost. X-23, if you've seen the movie Logan, for example, you know that she was created using Wolverine's DNA, being the 23rd version of that clone. So, yeah, Talon and Synch, brand new members, the cornerstone of this new X-Men team. But let's talk about the other members. The next member voted in is the Juggernaut. This is incredible. The Juggernaut has been a primary antagonist for the X-Men for a very long time, and seeing mutant solidarity and Juggernaut's sort of rehabilitation is kind of interesting and quite frankly a little awesome. Next, though, we get Cannonball, a member of the original member of the New Mutants. We have Prodigy, we have Frenzy, and of course, we got my girls Dazzler and Jubilee. And it's such a cool and triumphant moment for this team that it is, in fact, the perfect moment to ruin the gala, and that is when Nimrod arrives. And just in case you don't know who Nimrod is, originally appearing in Uncanny X-Men 191, Nimrod is a future alternate Sentinel and was originally created by the legends Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. Back to the comic, of course. We get narration on how Orchis had been planning this night for years, having secretly weakened Magic by poisoning her with nanotech, using the media against mutants as well, making them look bad in the eyes of public. Luckily, it is at this point that Iceman comes in to save the day. Except Nimrod melts Iceman. And I don't mean he just like melts his ice. I mean he murders Iceman. Iceman dies. And it is one of the gruesome, most shocking death scenes I've seen, and it's very heart-wrenching as well, in a Marvel comic. Not to mention that he dies right in front of his boyfriend, Romeo. So this is when a lot really starts to happen. We then see Jean Grey use her telekinetic abilities to launch the Juggernaut like a bullet at Nimrod. Pretty awesome. Also, we get a shot of more Sentinels coming down from the sky. Strong ones at that. This is one Nathaniel Essex clone, known as Dr. Stasis, teleports in with a woman, I think, named Karma Shapandar. Dr. Stasis then reveals his plot to Professor X. Just in case you don't know Dr. Stasis is a Mr. Sinister clone, okay? That's who Dr. Stasis is. Anyways, he reveals his plot to Professor X. How he staged and sabotaged Krakoan pharmaceuticals meant to help the world, and how now they'll be poisoned by these mutant pharmaceuticals. And if things don't keep getting weirder, Dr. Stasis is like, oh, MODOK is also here. And MODOK says he's going to activate the kill switch in all of these medicines. And anyone who's taken these medicines starts to have a reaction. White Queen very quickly identifies it as a chemical reaction within the limbic cortex. But we're then led on that Orchis has also hijacked the transit system in Krakoa, turning even the vehicles against the mutants. Things are not looking good at the Hellfire Gala. We get some more action this time with Kate Pryde messing up some Sentinels using her phasing abilities. Now these are like Iron Man Stark Sentinels, so very interesting look to them. We also get some more action with Ms. Marvel and Rasputin 4 fighting side by side against the Sentinel. We get the Juggernaut and Nimrod. They're continuing to clash and duke it out. They destroy a tower. At this point, Jean Grey, being the true girl boss that she is, uses her powers to just stop everything. Like, all the action is frozen. Jean apologizes to the guest and says she's going to let her friends free in a second to handle the bad guys, at which point the next phase of the Orchis attack goes into effect. And that's when Moira McTaggart, I think, or Moira X as she's called, arrives. They explain she has a, quote, artificial mind that cannot be controlled by telepathy. And she stabs Jean in the back with poison from Otherworld. It kills her, pretty much. Not immediately, but what we have is sort of this telepathic connection with Scott Summers, who can no longer feel Jean or his legs. There is nothing like the death of Jean Grey that will rally the X-Men. But as the X-Men are sort of getting hyped to fight back, Moira takes Professor X hostage and is like, look, tell them to stop. Professor X, you know, he always makes terrible decisions, in my opinion. He makes a lot of really bad decisions. And his decision here is to remove Cerebro, say, God forgive me, and then he surrenders. Dr. Stasis announces the terms to Professor X of surrender, and that is mutants have to leave Earth, and any that return, death is their sentence. As she is laying dying, though, Jean is communicating with Firestar. Firestar tells her that Orchis is lying about everything. Jean knows this, of course. She says lies are strong. And in saying this, Jean has said, look, I've made Stasis believe that he recruited you, Firestar, to Orcus. And Firestar's like, wait, you recruited me to Orcus. I can't do this. Back to Charles Xavier. He's now telepathically telling mutants to enter these Krakoan gateways and leave the planet. He's telling all the mutants in the world. And he's not just telling them, he's making them. Like using his powers. Now, some mutants, such as Nightcrawler, are resisting. They have anti-telepathic training. I think it's called the Red Triangle Protocol. But most are doing what Charles is making them do, and that is, of course, leave Earth. A lot of the world's problems are about to be blamed again on mutants, and so that is why Charles feels like, we're going to just surrender at this point. He thinks they're going to another planet. Now, Mr. Sinister has made many clones of himself, including Dr. Stasis, but he's also made a clone of his wife, Rebecca Essex. She's now called Mother Righteous, and she lives in the astral plane and has somehow trapped Krakoa in her lantern. I don't know what that means, but this is what we see. This is some panels in the comic. The next couple of scenes we get are, mutants leaving Earth. They're being filtered through these Krakoan portals. And then we see Firestar, who seems unwilling and very scared to take on Orcus alone and basically be left on Earth, by herself. Jean insists that some mutants are employing this Red Triangle defense and that they're not going to leave Earth. It makes them impervious to telepathic control. Now, Charles is making all these other mutants remove them by force if he has to. However, some might remain on Earth if they can evade capture. Of course, we know that many probably will. So in this next scene, we see the skeleton of Jean Grey and this sort of final telepathic communication with Cyclops. And in it, he's like, I love you and I need you. Poor Cyclops. Losing Jean Grey yet again. It's very hard on all of us, of course. Well, you know who else loved Jean Grey? Yeah, that's Wolverine. Okay, and Jean has awoken him, and his heart is broken, and he erupts into a berserker rage, and, well, it doesn't bode well for members of Orcus. He's just cutting it all up. This is really the only time we see Wolverine in this comic. Good old Logan, Weapon X. Next, we get a panel where the Five are being, quote, whisked away, and it's mentioned that not even Professor X knows where they're going. Now, Mystique, who is kind of offended that Charles would, in fact, attempt to control her, tells him so. And then he does something really weird. He kind of telepathically makes her flip out. And, she gets, yeeted out a window. And I'm not sure if that was her reacting or Charles making her do it or something else. But she lands outside on some rocks, blood leaking from her head. The next thing we see is that the sea has claimed her. I bet she just turned into a fish. There's no body. She's probably not dead. It's Mystique, right? Here we have Stasis and Moira, and they're getting ready to kill the last mutants who are resisting Charles. That's when kind of Emma wakes them up and tells them to link hands for a group teleport. Moira is ready to kill them, and just as an Orcus agent lines up his shot against the teleporter, Kingpin, who's there, steps in and just crushes their head. Good on you, Kingpin. Just chilling at the Hellfire Gala. Thank you. So the mutants teleport out and ironically teleport to the old Hellfire Club basement in New York City. However, this is the last teleport for Lords, the mutant teleporter, who perishes surrounded by all these mutants and Kingpin that she just saved. So in the next series of panels, what we see is Firestar joining with Orcus. Orcus is about to kill them, Nimrod specifically, but Dr. Stasis prevents Nimrod, and he's like, no. Firestar was actually a traitor and has been feeding me information the entire time. This, of course, was implanted into his brain by Jean Grey. We go back to the mutants that teleported, and in this group, it includes Emma Frost, Kitty Pryde, Kamala Khan, also the Kingpin. And what they figure out is that there are other portals there at the Hellfire Club, the old Hellfire Club, and none of the portals work. Now we're back at the gala, and there's a bunch of humans left on Krakoa, and they want to leave. A lot of these humans are looking at their cell phones. The reception just came back in, and they're seeing news reports that there are no human survivors. They're very confused. Mr. Stasis was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, our PR department got a little ahead of ourselves." And then he has all the humans killed. Charles feels all of their deaths, but also feels that they didn't feel any pain upon dying. It was very nice of you, Mr. Stasis. Moira is ready to kill Charles. Charles says, "I'm ready for you." Moira's like, "Ha ha ha, how brave." Except Charles is then like, no, I was just thinking out loud. And that's when like Rogue like bursts out and saves the professor. Awesome. Charles is like, "No, I want to go back." He proclaims they're all dead. And what he means is this: the teleporters were sabotaged. Rogue kind of sets them down. They're having a conversation now. And the teleporters were sabotaged. They weren't headed off planet. According to Charles, they were sent into the meat grinder. He sent them there. 250,000 mutants dead. Rogue is a little shocked. She leaves him on this island, population 1. There are a few more pages, though, after this shocking conclusion. The first is Kingpin and White Queen talking about, no loss of trust between them, but she trusts him more than Orcus. The second is Kitty Pryde, who is somehow able to still travel through one of the portals and ends up at the Krakoan embassy in Israel, surrounded by Orcus goons. And that is the comic. Okay, this is the part of the video where I talk about myself and other things that I'm doing. Specifically, this time I want to implore you to please go check out my podcast. It's called Wrecked, a Fat Wreck fan podcast, especially if you are into music or specifically like 90s punk rock, like Lagwagon, Propagandhi, those kinds of bands, Fat Records bands. Myself and my co-host Allison go real in depth on every Fat Wreck album chronologically, and we talk about every song. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun doing it. So please check it out. It's in my comments, the link. It's also like in these Linktree things. You know how to find this information if you're really trying. We also have new episodes or new old episodes that I post on YouTube, but we're on Spotify and anywhere else that you can find podcasts. And now, back to the Fall of X. So this is a huge issue. There are a lot of people dying. This is huge, right? On-screen death of Iceman, Jean Grey, Lords. Possibly off-screen death of so many others, including, but probably not Mystique. This, though, might be the end of Krakoa and Mutants for good. Or Mutants on Krakoa for good, but I don't know. Who else is dead? We may not know the true scope of these casualties until later, or until I finally read all of the issues that I have piling up right here, all right? Like lots of them, okay? I've actually read a couple already, but, I won't tell you which ones. Let's talk about the ramifications. This is going to start a domino effect within the Marvel Universe, as they've done before, where they sort of like to reset the mutant timeline. They've done it with, for example, the Scarlet Witch, where she sort of deleted mutants, or a lot of them. And then they kind of came back, but not as many. It's something Marvel likes to do because they like to keep mutants marginalized and not like a large group of people that all humans are slowly evolving into. And it's just what they do. Comic-wise, I think to keep books trimmer, to not necessarily maybe have as many X books, or perhaps to have more X books. I don't know. But what's going to happen, I could not tell you. I suspect we're going to see how deep this plot goes, who's truly involved, and we're going to probably have an X-Men, getting revenge at some point. But it's very likely that things won't be the same, not just going forward, but even after the resolution of all of this. I cannot tell you where it's headed. like, I'm so, I don't want to say removed from Marvel Universe, but like I still feel like I'm just getting back into the swing of what's happening in the world. And so until I read more of the Fall of X storyline, I can only guess that things will just get worse. So, uh, that's almost the end of the episode, but we have one more segment. Before we leave, of course, this is our comic of the day, and it is a banger. This is Uncanny X-Men number 129. It is the first appearance of the Hellfire Club, which is why I chose it. It's also the first appearance of the White Queen. It's also the first appearance of Kitty Pryde. This is a slabbed comic. I bought it this way. I did not have the original. It is also signed by the man himself, Chris Claremont. I love this issue. It is an all-time favorite. It is so important in the X-Men universe. As you can see, we are talking about the Hellfire Club, White Queen, Kitty Pryde to this day. So, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed everything that I laid out there and discussed with you. I just don't know what's going to happen going forward with the Fall of X. Hopefully there is a positive resolution once this all settles down. But usually these types of events within the X-Men universe leave it changed forever and not necessarily for the good of the X-Men or the Marvel universe. And we'll see what it leads into. And until next time, I will give you a bit of a preview. And we'll be talking about X-Force right here, 43. And we'll be following along with the good old Fall of X storyline. And with that, friends, Excelsior.